Now, before we go on to step 4, I want to give a quick reminder about danger zones. So this graphic on the left shows the danger zones in escape routes in relation to the anchor and the river, and the towers as well. Now, no unauthorized personnel or nobody that is not actively working towards SAG setting should be in any of these danger zones at any time. And if someone is working towards setting SAG, they can and have to be in the danger zone at some points, but when they're not actively doing a task, they should be out towards the escape route. Now, I've also attached an image of the hoisting loop that we were talking about in the previous step for to help you understand what this may look like in the form of a graphic. Now, step 4, setting SAG. So we, of course, want to make sure our auto levels are set up again. We've waited at least 24 hours from hoisting, and ideally you have two that are 1.1 meters apart. Like I mentioned before, it's more important to have cables level to each other than on the exact F value, because cables will change throughout the day due to temperature, and this will take all day. So we'll clamp our small loop onto the cable, securing the cable on one side for safety, like in the previous diagram. And this loop isn't going to be like our hoisting loop. We're just going to leave a small loop in the cable that we're going to let out as we set SAG. And I'll show this in the next slide in a nice little diagram for you. So we'll loosen our clamps closest to the anchor a quarter turn at a time. And I forgot to mention the tail once again is secured to an adjacent cable so that if anything were to happen, failure were to happen, that tail isn't going to whip around and hurt anybody. And after we loosen our clamps, usually one of the masons will help you with this as they have more experience as to how much to start with the loosening. Then we'll strike with wood above the clamps and hopefully the cable will start to lower. You'll go back and forth with the walkie-talkies. If it's not lowering, you can loosen the cable a little bit more, loosen the clamps a little bit more, strike the cable again, and you'll have that back and forth. We're also going to have people shaking the cable or agitating the cable out over the saddles so that the friction there, especially if the cable is very dry, doesn't affect sag. So for example, if we're letting cable out, but it's not actually sliding over the walkway or the tower saddle, all of a sudden it could all slide at once and our cable could drop below the target sag value and we have to start all over again. So we'll continue all the way down to our F2 values, and then we'll secure the clamps and move on to the next cable. In the same manner, we want to start away from you, moving in, so that you don't block your view of the subsequent cable by setting sag on one of the other cables. And once again, we want to wait 24 hours minimum to then check the sag. If the sag is good after that point, we can move on to decking. If it's not, we can make our adjustments. So here on the left is a figure showing the loop of slack I was talking about clamped into the cable. Because the clamps will actually be flipped 180 degrees facing upward in the way we do it now, this slack will actually be underneath the cable. And here's a video showing the process. Clemente is loosening the clamp. And then I'm striking the cable. In this case, I'm striking in between. We could also be striking behind the clamps to loosen it. And you hear over the walkie-talkie communication. And we'll go through this process back and forth until we've reached our F2 values. And here is another nice video of showing the agitation process. I'll skip to where this happens. So once again, we're communicating about this before we do it. Okay, and that is our setting sag step of the process. And we'll move on to step 5, which is our final step of the entire sag setting process.